Well, good evening. I say it that way since that's when we expect most of the people who attend this to be watching. It is our Friday night Bible study. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. And we will be continuing as we have been in the book of Genesis. And we're ready to start chapter 23. I was just out on the lawn, and it looks like I am going to have to, in the next week or two, get off my lazy backside and mow the weeds. First cutting is always just the weeds. There's no grass that grows, but the weeds get so prolific and tall, you have to get out there and knock them down with the mower. And that time is, well, Monday will start the month of April, so it'll probably be April before I actually get started on that. But around here, that's not an unusual time to have to start mowing. The weeds, the grass, the yard. In Great Britain, it'd be the garden. Anyway. Big news this week was obviously the collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge on the southeast side of Baltimore, crossing the river there. Actually, it's not just a river, it's also kind of a bay, and it is their harbor. And, pretty obviously what happened was that a container ship that was leaving the port, had been there for about 3 days, had a power outage and had trouble navigating, and the two pilots on board, and I don't know, I haven't heard yet. Frequently with shipping, when a ship enters or leaves a harbor where you're just not out in the open sea, they actually bring on board what's known as a harbor pilot, someone who is familiar with that particular seaway, knows it well, and is able to assist the captain in controlling the ship and getting it to dock properly. We haven't heard if there was a harbor pilot on board. We have heard that there were two pilots. But at any rate, they managed to lose control of the ship. It veered out of the main path of the channel, and it was actually, as it was on the way out, it was to the left of the center point of the channel, which is acceptable, and that was a good place for it to be. But it started veering off to the right, and it got so far out of the intended channel that it actually struck one of the piers of the Key Bridge. And yes, it is named after a Mr. Key, but it is also a key bridge. And because of the design of the thing, brought the whole superstructure span down. Now, the parts leading up to that superstructure span, and when I say superstructure, I mean that the metal framework was above the roadway. The problem with that design, the bridge was built, I think they said, in 1976 and was entered use in 1977. And in those days, they were still designing bridges such that a single point of failure would bring down the entire bridge. And if you've watched the videos, then you'll see how once the pier came out, the southern approach portion of the bridge came down, as well as the main span of the bridge between the two piers for the superstructure portion of the bridge. And once those came down, you can actually see where the superstructure broke apart close to the northern pier. And once that happened, then the part of the superstructure portion of the bridge north of that other pillar, the one that didn't get hit, falls over into the river slash bay there, and you can see the whole thing then come crashing in. The entire collapse took in the neighborhood of 10 seconds. That was really kind of something to see that. And they have since provided pictures where you can see that the ship, a portion of, I don't know if it was the pillars or some of the metal of the bridge, actually cut into the bow of the ship and just kind of sliced it open like a knife and peeled the metal away. So the ship is able to float. The damage was not below the waterline, but it was very heavily damaged, and it'll take a lot of work to get it back in operation. The other problem is that with the bridge down across that bay, the ships that are at most of the docks in the Baltimore area can't get out, and ships that were coming to Baltimore can't get in. Now, there is a portion of the port of Baltimore outside that bridge, so that part can operate, but the ships that are inside are trapped until we get the bridge cleared out of the way. They're apparently already at work on that. Haven't heard if they finished the recovery operations for the bodies. They may need to move portions of the bridge in order to get to all the bodies. The good news with that was that the ship's operators did call in on the marine radio and notify authorities that they had lost control and might hit the bridge, and commands went out from Maryland officials to get the bridge closed. Apparently they had crews on either end of the bridge that were able to close off the bridges. They got, I think, state police officers there too. They even talked about trying to get out on the bridge and notify the workers who were repairing the bridge, who, according to one source I saw, were on break at the time and were sitting in their cars. And a couple of those persons were rescued and have survived the incident, but they believe that 6 of them did not survive the collapse. So that's what was going on, big news this week, and kind of has attracted all our attention. And there'll be a lot to say about it. How could this happen? Well, accidents happen. And there'll be, the Swiss cheese model. If all the holes line up and enough gaps in our safety measures line up just right, then an accident can happen. Now, we have ships going in and out of harbors daily in every port in the United States. So something like this is a relatively rare occurrence.
And if you've heard somebody claim that Joe Biden is responsible,
yeah,
that he caused it.
I was watching that because I've been paying attention to this, and somebody had a title on a video that said they were going to talk about it, but he got into politics. Well, so-and-so said this, he's incompetent, so therefore, since Joe Biden put him in place, Joe Biden is responsible for this. Well, yeah,
I think the person who made that statement is incompetent.
Well, maybe not. We don't know. Is the president responsible every time an airliner goes down? Because he appointed the transportation secretary. I mean, I did see one report that suggested that this ship was having power outage problems while in port. And that source suggested the ship should not have been allowed to leave harbor until they got those problems fully fixed, which apparently they didn't, because power outages, we don't know for sure yet, but seem to have been at least a factor in the incident that took place. So, whatever. And by the way, when we say these things, we are not advocating for or endorsing Joe Biden. We're just questioning the attitudes that, well, I don't like this politician, so therefore if something goes bad, that politician is to blame.
I'm not advocating any politician.
Yeah, I was about to say, I am not a fan of Joe Biden, but I haven't been a fan. I haven't been a fan of any president in my lifetime, really. So they all have had their problems. I do have a Bible question. We read 2 of them last week, and then another one came in after we recorded our broadcast last week, or our Bible study last week. So I answered it, and I have printed it out, and here it is.
You gotta check the website and see if there's anything there.
Anything where?
On the website email.
Oh, to see if I have a new question?
Yeah.
Well, they send me an email when I get a question, and I haven't.
I'm talking about my website.
Oh. Well, you have a computer in there. You can look it up.
You know, I don't think I remember how.
Are you talking about the InVainDoTheyWorshipMe.com website?
It's been so long since I haven't been on there since before I went into the hospital.
Yeah, so that's been a couple of years now.
Yeah.
Because
I don't know if it's still active. I know they're still charging me for it, but I don't. Somebody could have hacked in and taken over for all I know.
2 years ago tonight, you were in the hospital.
Yeah.
Did you stop and think about that?
Huh?
2 years ago tonight, you were in the hospital.
2 years? I thought it was 3.
2. You went into the hospital in March of 2022.
Okay.
They let you out either on March 31st or April 1st. I forget which it is, but anyway.
Thursday.
Yes, I'd have to look at a calendar from 2022 to know. Anyway, here's the question from someone named Joy. What are good crystal bracelets according to the Bible? Dear Joy, thank you for visiting our site and for submitting your question about crystal items. I assume that by bracelet you meant bracelet. There are people who believe that crystals have the ability to focus spiritual energy in ways that benefit the wearer. Science has not found any confirmed benefit to wearing crystals. I even looked that up. The King James Bible uses the word crystal a limited number of times. Quotations come from the NIV, so the word rendered crystal in the King James Version will be italicized. Neither gold nor crystal can compare with it being wisdom, nor can it be had for jewels of gold, Job 28:17. Spread out above the heads of the living creatures was what looked like an expanse, sparkling like ice. Ice is the word that is rendered crystal in the King James. And awesome, Ezekiel 1:22. And in the King James, instead of saying awesome, they said terrible. Also before the throne there was what looked like a sea of glass, clear as crystal. That's Revelation 4:6. It, that being the holy city, shone with the glory of God, and its brilliance was like that of a very precious jewel, like a jasper, clear as crystal. Revelation 21:11. And then finally, then the angel showed me the river of the water of life, as clear as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb. Revelation 22, verse 1. In all those cases, the crystal represents something of beauty and great value, but no spiritual benefit is associated with these items. Spiritual growth comes from a meaningful relationship with the Creator of the creature, that is, ourselves, with the Creator. We get to know God in several ways, including from a study of His written word, the Bible. I encourage you to make regular Bible study a part of your spiritual growth journey. Sincerely, me, site name, position, all that stuff.
Well, you know what?
What?
I used to have a pair of earrings that were called Alaskan black diamonds. They were just simply black crystals.
Yeah.
My ears had been pierced for years and years and years and years, so long that they should not grow back. And here I was wearing these crystal earrings. My ears grew back. Maybe there is a benefit. It undoes your piercings.
Yeah, but it wouldn't have grown back while you were wearing them. They would have grown back while you weren't wearing any kind of earring.
Yeah, I did quit wearing them, didn't I?
Yeah.
And then when I tried again, my ears had grown back.
Yeah, I actually gave you a set of pearl earrings, and you wore them for a time.
Yeah?
And then you quit wearing them, and now you tell me you probably can't wear them because last time you tried, you couldn't get the stud through.
Right. Which should not have happened. But then I had been wearing crystal earrings for a while, so maybe, I'm being silly, of course.
Yeah. That's my wife. She likes to be silly.
I'm especially gifted at that.
And she claims, though she's been that way all her life, she claims it's my last name that allows her to be silly.
Your dad gave me this funny look and said, "You're weird." So I responded very quickly, "Well, of course I am. I'm afraid."
Yeah. Well, let us get started with our journey through Genesis. So let's bow our heads. Our Father in heaven, we thank you so much for giving us another week of life, for giving us time that we can set aside to focus on you and your written word. We want to use the written word in a way that links us more closely to you and enables the transformation in our characters that will heal us and prepare us for an eternity of living in close contact with you. Send the Holy Spirit that we might know you better through our journey at this time. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. So, we are ready for Genesis chapter 23. And this version titles this section, The Burial of Sarah. And it starts out by telling us that when Sarah was 127 years old, she died at Kiriath Arba, now called Hebron, in the land of Canaan. There Abraham mourned and wept for her. Now, the difference in their ages we can calculate at about 9 years. The narrative told us that when the angels came, or the angel of the Lord came and talked to them and made the promise that in a year's time Isaac would be born. At that time, Sarah was 90. The narrative also tells us that when Isaac was born, Abraham was 100 years old. So,
How would you like to be the parent of a 2-year-old at your age?
yeah, that would be
A toddler, you know?
that would tax my physical abilities.
You wouldn't have to be the one to deliver it.
Yeah. At any rate, from that we gather that there's approximately 9 years difference in their ages. So if she was 127 when she died, that would mean that Abraham was about 136 when she died. And we will read, probably later tonight, that he lived to be 175. So you subtract 136 from 175, you get 39. So we have about 39 years after Sarah died that Abraham continued to live, got another wife, had other sons. We'll get into that in the next chapter. But for now, let's go through here. So she dies, and they were at what was known as Kiriath Arba, or now Hebron, in the land of Canaan. There Abraham mourned and wept for her. Then, leaving her body, he said to the Hittite elders, "Here I am, a stranger and a foreigner among you. Please sell me a piece of land so I can give my wife a proper burial." The Hittites replied to Abraham, "Listen, my lord, you are an honored prince among us. Choose the finest of our tombs and bury her there. No one here will refuse to help you in this way." Then Abraham bowed low before the Hittites and said, "Since you are willing to help me in this way, be so kind as to ask Ephron, son of Zohar, to let me buy his cave at Machpelah, down at the end of his field. I will pay the full price in the presence of witnesses, so I will have a permanent burial place for my family." Now, in our day and age, we rely on government to provide the service of recording and tracking sales of real estate. When you buy your house, the purchase is recorded in a book of records at your usually your county courthouse or your county administrative building, and there's a department that has records that record as far back as they keep records, which is usually in the United States as far back as the county has existed, so that you can go in, you can look up, you can find maps, and the maps will give you references to the most recent transaction, and then each transaction, that will tell you who owns it, but then each transaction refers to the previous transaction for that property, so that you can follow it back and find the chain of ownership for a particular piece of property as far back as the county has records. In Abraham's day and time, that usually, I don't think government was in that business yet. So when you did a land transaction, you formalized it and recorded it through the use of witnesses, so that there would be people who could bear witness that yes, he paid this much and received the right to use such and such parcel of land or real estate. That's how it was done. And so Abraham specifies the land that he wants to buy, specifically the cave at Machpelah, owned by Ephron, son of Zohar. They used that, nowadays we use first name and surname. Back then they used first name and name of father to specify the individual's identity. So in this case, Ephron, son of Zohar, is the identity. The cave was located at Machpelah, so now we know the property. And to be more specific, Abraham specifies down at the end of his field. And then he says, I'll pay the full price in the presence of witnesses, so I will have a permanent burial place for my family. Ephron was sitting there among the elders, and he answered Abraham as the others listened, speaking publicly before all the Hittite elders of the town. No, my lord, he said to Abraham, please listen to me. I will give you the field and the cave. Here, in the presence of my people, I give it to you. Go and bury your dead. So Abraham has offered to pay for the land, and Ephron has said, we respect you. Apparently, Abraham had won favor with the people he was living around, which suggests that he was not a toxic person, or they wouldn't have liked him, right? Are you there, or have you fallen asleep?
I just having a good long yawn. I will be falling asleep.
All right. Well, anyway. What do you think of my evidence that Abraham was not a particularly toxic person? Seeing
it's really hard to follow you because we don't have a good connection.
Oh.
But what I heard sounded okay.
Okay. Well,
I didn't hear it all.
Essentially, they respected him to the point that Ephron was willing to give him not only the cave, but also the field.
I've always taken that as a sign that land was not so valuable. If you're going to be giving away land.
Well, earlier though,
That's not something we would do today.
up there at verse 6, the Hittites called him my lord, and said, you are an honored prince among us. So,
yeah, this is after they after Abraham rescued the people that had been taken captive?
well, that probably had something to do with it, yes. Abraham again bowed low before the citizens of the land, and he replied to Ephron, as everyone listened, no, listen to me. I will buy it from you. Let me pay the full price for the field so I can bury my dead there. Now, this is kind of an interesting negotiation because in our day and age, we're used to negotiation being about getting the lowest price you can get. But it's already been offered at free, and Abraham says, no, I'm going to buy it.
He was also offered the plunder.
Right.
And he personally would not accept any.
Right.
So he did allow his men to accept it.
Well, I don't know about his men, but the Hittites and others who had joined him, he let them keep what they wanted.
I said that.
Well, you said his men, and I thought by his men you meant Abraham's servants and fighters who lived in Abraham's household. He didn't keep any for them.
I meant those that went with him to fight.
But you've got to be more specific, because Abraham Abraham
read my mind.
Abraham took 300 some odd of his servants as fighters.
His trained men.
Yeah. And the evidence suggests that they didn't get anything other than they worked for Abraham. They got their livelihood, their places to live, their food, and all that from Abraham.
Yeah.
At any rate, back at verse 14, Ephron answered Abraham, "My lord, please listen to me. The land is worth 400 pieces of silver. But what is that between friends? Go ahead and bury your dead." Now, he's saying what he's saying, kind of around Robin Hood's barn to say what he wants to say, but that's probably the culture of the time. That's how they talk to each other. If you were going to name a price, you didn't want to sound greedy, so you didn't name it outright. You kind of went to it backwards like this. And the Hebrew there was 400 shekels, about 10 pounds or 4.6 kilograms in weight. And I don't know the modern value of silver, but 10 pounds of silver at today's prices is probably pretty steep. At any rate, that's the price that Ephron names. And he says, but what is that between friends? Go ahead and bury your dead. So Abraham agreed to Ephron's price and paid the amount he had suggested, 400 pieces of silver, weighed according to the market standard. Whatever standard they had available at the time, that's what they used. And it says that the Hittite elders witnessed the transaction. So it was made formal and official. Abraham now owned the land and the cave, and he intended it as a place of burial for his family. So Abraham bought the plot of land belonging to Ephron at Machpelah near Mamre. This included the field itself, the cave that was in it, and all the surrounding trees. It was transferred to Abraham as his permanent possession in the presence of the Hittite elders at the city gate. And we know from other stories in the Old Testament that the city gate was the location where the elders would meet, and that's where transactions were formalized at the city gate in the presence of the elders. So we see that happening here. Then Abraham buried his wife Sarah there in Canaan in the cave of Machpelah near Mamre, also called Hebron. So the cave and the field were transferred from the Hittites to Abraham for use as a permanent burial place. And that's it. That is chapter 23. Relatively short compared to the next chapter, which we'll go ahead and get started in right now, chapter 24. Subtitled in this version, A Wife for Isaac. Now, what we haven't seen, but we're going to see, when we got to the end of chapter 22, which told the story of Abraham's test in offering Isaac as a sacrifice, it only tells us where Abraham went. It doesn't tell us where Isaac went. And we will find later that while Abraham went to Beersheba for a time, when we next encounter Isaac, he will be living someplace else. We'll find that towards the end of this chapter, and we'll talk about it, I guess, when we get there. So, verse 24, Abraham was now a very old man, and the Lord had blessed him in every way. One day Abraham said to his oldest servant, the man in charge of his household, "Take an oath by putting your hand under my thigh. Swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and earth, that you will not allow my son to marry one of these local Canaanite women. Go instead to my homeland, to my relatives, to find a wife there for my son Isaac.
Again, incest.
Well, yeah, we've talked about the relationship. Rebekah would not end up being in the same generation as Isaac, primarily because of how old Abraham was before Isaac was born. Now, given what we have read, we say Abraham was 100 when Isaac was born, and he was about 136 when Sarah died. So that means that when Sarah died, Isaac was approximately 36 years old. We'll see his age here at the point of this story in just a little bit. Now, when it says, go to my homeland, Abraham came from Ur of the Chaldees, which means that he would be going back to what the Old Testament will eventually call Babylon, or the land of the Chaldeans. But that's not where he's sending this servant, his oldest servant. And by the way, most modern versions, I think, do not give this person a name. Yeah, the NIV just calls him the chief servant in his household. I think you have to go to the NIV to get a name, and likely what has happened is that the King James translators made the decision to transliterate into a name when in fact other more modern translators have made the decision to translate. This isn't a name, this is a title. This is going to happen every now and then as we go through the Old Testament, where the newer versions translate and render it as a title instead of rendering it as a transliterated name. Okay, that might not be the case here, though, because looking in the King James, it says, and Abraham said unto his eldest servant of his house, that ruled over all that he had, put, I pray thee, my hand under thy hand under my thigh. So I guess that's not a case. I know there's a name given to this person, and I don't know if it was here or someplace else. We'll see as we go on. So in this version, it's just take an oath by putting your hand under my thigh. Swear that you won't allow my son to marry one of these local Canaanite women. Sounds like a bit of racial prejudice going on there. Go instead to my homeland, to my relatives, and find a wife there for my son Isaac. The servant asked, but what if I can't find a young woman who is willing to travel so far from home? Should I then take Isaac there to live among your relatives in the land you came from? No, Abraham responded. Be careful never to take my son there. For the Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and my native land, solemnly promised to give this land to my descendants. Footnote A there is almost certainly going to say seed. Scroll down real quick and look. Have to scroll down a whole lot farther because this is a longer chapter. Yes, footnote A, seed, also in verse 60 later on. So, that's what that is about. He, the God of heaven, will send his angel ahead of you, and he will seek to it that you find a wife there for my son. If she is unwilling to come back with you, then you are free from this oath of mine. But under no circumstances are you to take my son there. So the servant took an oath by putting his hand under the thigh of his master Abraham. He swore to follow Abraham's instructions. Then he loaded 10 of Abraham's camels with all kinds of expensive gifts from his master, and he traveled to distant Aram Naharaim. There he went to the town where Abraham's brother Nahor had settled. He made the camels kneel beside a well just outside the town. It was evening, and the women were coming out to draw water. "O Lord, God of my master Abraham," he prayed, "please give me success today and show unfailing love to my master Abraham." Now, this is showing us the effects of the classist system that was already in place in humanity at that point in time. This servant didn't feel worthy to consider the Creator his own God. The Creator was the God of his master, Abraham. Don't do this for my sake, do this for Abraham's sake. Clearly, he's in a mindset that he is of lesser value to the Creator than is Abraham. "See, I am standing here beside this spring, and the young women of the town are coming out to draw water. This is my request. I will ask one of them, 'Please give me a drink from your jug.' If she says, 'Yes, have a drink, and I will water your camels too,' let her be the one you have selected as Isaac's wife. This is how I will know that you have shown unfailing love to my master." Now that's quite a test. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the thirst of large mammals. I worked at a dairy farm when I was younger, and the farmer had one cow who had trouble delivering a calf. The calf's head was a little bit big for the birth canal, so in delivering the calf, she actually stressed the nerves in the top of her hips, meaning that she was lame for a while and unable to use her back legs. So she was just laying in a passageway next to the barn, unable to walk for a while. And so it was our duty as caretakers for these animals to bring her water. And I remember carrying like a 5-gallon pail of water out to her and having her drink that whole thing down just like that. Just, "Oh, good, a drink. Drink the whole thing down." Then you have to bring her more. These are not cows. They're camels. Their body size would be roughly the same as that of a cow, but they're camels. Camels are able to store food reserves in the form of fat and water in their homes. So if they've been on a journey, they're going to be very thirsty. So, yeah, if this girl says, "I'll water your camels too," she is opening up a whole lot of work, because they didn't probably, usually they had to walk down steps into the well to get water and then back out. And she's not going to carry more than one human's load of water at a time. So it's probably going to be quite a number of trips down into the well to water his camels. At any rate, that's the test that he sets up in his prayer. And then the narrative tells us in verse 15, before he had finished praying, he saw a young woman named Rebekah coming out with her water jug on her shoulder. She was the daughter of Bethuel, who was the son of Abraham's brother Nahor and his wife Milcah. So Nahor and Abraham are brothers. Nahor has a son named Bethuel. Isaac has a son, or Abraham has a son named Isaac. But Isaac was born so late in Abraham's life that Nahor's granddaughter is here about to be considered as a wife for Isaac. Rebekah, the narrative tells us, was very beautiful and old enough to be married, but she was still a virgin. Now, how old that was, we can't say for sure. We know that in later years, young ladies were considered old enough to be married while still in their teens. Whether or not that was the case with Rebekah, we can't say. I don't think we have a comparative age for her to Isaac. She went down to the spring, filled her jug, and came up again. Running over to her, the servant said, "Please give me a little drink of water from your jug." "Yes, my lord," she answered, "have a drink." And she quickly lowered her jug from her shoulder and gave him a drink. When she had given him a drink, she said, "I'll draw water for your camels, too, until they have had enough to drink." So she quickly emptied her jug into the watering trough and ran back to the well to draw water for all his camels. He may have only had 2 or 3 or 4. Would have had a huge caravan of them probably, but still, that was a lot of water for her to draw. The servant watched her in silence, wondering whether or not the Lord had given him success in his mission. Then, at last, when the camels had finished drinking, he took out a gold ring for her nose and 2 large gold bracelets for her wrist. Now, there's the other footnote in this chapter. It's on the word bracelets. And it says here, from the Hebrew, a gold nose ring wearing a beka, 0.2 ounces or 6 grams, and 2 gold bracelets wearing 10, and they suggest shekels, which would be 4 ounces or about 114 grams. But that's a guess because the Hebrew only says 10, not 10 shekels. They're just guessing that they meant shekels there. Let's see where we were here. So he gives her this jewelry, the gold ring for her nose, and the 2 large gold bracelets for her wrists. "Whose daughter are you?" he asked, "and please tell me, would your father have any room to put us up for the night?" So in previous instances where a stranger shows up, the hospitality has been openly offered to the visitors without a request. But in this case, the servant is actually making the request. "I am the daughter of Bethuel," she replied. "My grandparents are Nahor and Milcah. Yes, we have plenty of straw and feed for the camels, and we have room for guests." The man bowed low and worshipped the Lord. "Praise the Lord, the God of my master Abraham," he said. "The Lord has shown unfailing love and kindness to my master, for he has led me straight to my master's relatives." The young woman ran home to tell her family everything that had happened. Now, Rebekah had a brother named Laban. Here's where he's introduced. He's going to play a big part in the story of the book of Genesis later on, who ran out to meet the man at the spring. He had seen the nose ring and the bracelets on his sister's wrists, and he had heard Rebekah tell what the man had said. So he rushed out to the spring where the man was still standing beside his camels. Laban said to him, "Come and stay with us, you who are blessed by the Lord. Why are you standing here outside the town when I have a room all ready for you and a place prepared for the camels?" Here's the explicit invitation. So the man went home with Laban, and Laban unloaded the camels, gave him straw for their bedding, fed them, and provided water for the man and the camel drivers to wash their feet. Then food was served. But Abraham's servant said, "I don't want to eat until I have told you why I have come." "All right," Laban said, "tell us." Now I want to scan through here in the King James and see if the name that I'm familiar with for this servant is given here. Sorry for the silence here. I'm trying to scan through here and find this. Okay, I'm thinking that it was earlier, back there when we read when Abraham said that his servant would be his heir. And I'm thinking
What was your question?
well, I'm looking to see, because there's a name associated with this servant, and I think it comes from the King James. I'm trying to see where it is.
You're looking for what?
The name of the servant.
Eliezer.
Thank you. I already knew that. I'm trying to find it. Where's it listed? Because I'm not finding it in chapter 24.
It's where God promised Abraham an heir, and Abraham pointed out that he's too old. Would he please bless his servant Eliezer as he is his heir? And God said no. In a year's time, I believe it says, your wife Sarah will have a child.
Well, I don't
That's
think
not what
it's
it
there.
said, but it was when he was, I may be making this up, but I believe it's when Abraham was saying that he couldn't have children. He was too old. So would Eliezer be blessed?
Okay. It is in chapter 15. That's the one where he walked, where the Lord walked between the halved carcasses. And in verse 2. Huh?
Did I make up the story
No.
then?
Listen to verse 2. And Abram said, "Lord God, what wilt thou give me, seeing I go childless, and the steward of my house is this Eliezer of Damascus?" So that's where his servant is named. Now, we generally assume that the oldest or chief servant here in chapter 24 is this same Eleazar. But I'm not sure that that assumption is necessarily warranted. I'm not going to say it isn't. I think it's likely that it was, but in chapter 24, he's just the servant. He's not named. Well, anyway, we stopped there at verse 33. The food was served, and the servant said that he didn't want to eat until he'd stated why he came. All right, Laban said, tell us. So it seems that Laban has kind of taken over the household from his father Bethuel, because Laban's doing the talking, Laban's doing the inviting. It doesn't tell us if Bethuel was already deceased. It seems unlikely that he was, but it does seem that Laban is kind of taken over here. And given his character as revealed later in this book, we can imagine that Laban was just that kind of take charge guy who liked to be in control, and whether his dad was alive or not would kind of be doing the things that should have been left to his dad to do. Just some speculation here. Reading on verse 34. I am Abraham's servant, he explained, and the Lord has greatly blessed my master. He has become a wealthy man. The Lord has given him flocks of sheep and goats, herds of cattle, a fortune in silver and gold, and many male and female servants, and camels and donkeys. All the possessions that were important to their lifestyle, Abraham had lots of them, including a lot of people who served Abraham and did the functions of the household. Watching the animals, preparing the food, all these things. They worked together as a community to make life possible. When Sarah, my master's wife, was very old, she gave birth to my master's son, and my master has given him everything he owns. And my master made me take an oath. He said, do not allow my son to marry one of these local Canaanite women. Go instead to my father's house, to my relatives, and find a wife there for my son. But I said to my master, what if I can't find a young woman who's willing to go back with me? He responded, the Lord, in whose presence I have lived, will send his angel with you and will make your mission successful. Yes, you must find a wife for my son from among my relatives, from my father's family. Then you will have fulfilled your obligation. But if you go to my relatives and they refuse to let her go with you, you will be free from my oath. So today, when I came to the spring, I prayed this prayer. O Lord, God of my master Abraham, please give me success on this mission. See, I am standing here beside this spring. This is my request. When a young woman comes to draw water, I will say to her, please give me a little drink of water from your jug. If she says, yes, have a drink, and I will draw water for your camels too, then let her be the one you have selected to be the wife of my master's son. Before I had finished praying in my heart, by the way, for those of you who might be interested, prayers can be solely in the heart. They don't have to be spoken, as we see being done here. I saw Rebekah coming out with her water jug on her shoulder. She went down to the spring and drew water. So I said to her, "Please give me a drink." She quickly lowered her jug from her shoulder and said, "Yes, have a drink, and I will water your camels too." So I drank, and then she watered the camels. Then I asked, "Whose daughter are you?" She replied, "I am the daughter of Bethuel, and my grandparents are Nahor and Milcah." So I put the ring on her nose and the bracelets on her wrists. Then I bowed low and worshipped the Lord. I praised the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, because he had led me straight to my master's niece to be his son's wife. So now it's explicit that she's a niece. Well, actually, she's a cousin, because a niece would have been a daughter of Nahor, and she's a daughter of Nahor's son. So she's a grandniece. But, okay, she's a niece. We'll go with that. So tell me, will you or won't you show unfailing love and faithfulness to my master? Please tell me yes or no, and then I'll know what to do next. Then Laban and Bethuel replied, so now we know for sure that Bethuel was alive. "The Lord has obviously brought you here, so there is nothing we can say. Here is Rebekah. Take her and go. Yes, let her be the wife of your master's son, as the Lord is directed." Now, what didn't we read here?
I wasn't listening. I'm looking for something in the Bible.
All right. Well, we just read how the servant told his story, and he told what Rebekah had done. He told why he's there and what he wants. And he asks the men, "Will you let me take this woman back to be Isaac's wife?" And the men say, "Take her and go. Yes, let her be the wife of your master's son as the Lord has directed." What didn't we read there?
We didn't hear her permission.
Nobody asked her.
Right.
Could that be an explanation for some of the things that will happen later in this book? Just wondering. The thing is, neither Rebekah nor Isaac are involved in setting this up. Isaac is back wherever he is. We'll find out in just a little bit. Rebekah has not been asked. Her father and brother have said, "Yeah, here she is, take her." And yet she's about to travel what in those days was many days' journey, probably the last she would see of her family, to marry a man she hasn't met and doesn't know. And nobody thought what was going on was odd. That's how they did things. Can it be any surprise that we get the sense of a strained relationship in this marriage?
I thought Laban asked her somewhere and she agreed to it. Or was this an Ellen thing?
I don't know. Let's go ahead and finish the chapter, and then maybe we'll find out. When Abraham's servant heard their answer, he bowed down to the ground and worshipped the Lord. Then he brought out silver and gold jewelry and clothing and presented them to Rebekah. He also gave expensive presents to her brother and mother. I wonder what her dad got. Nothing, apparently. Then they ate their meal, and the servant and the men with him stayed there overnight.
That makes it sound like Daddy's no longer around.
He's there because he specifically replied after the servant made the request. Both Laban and Bethuel replied, "Here's Rebekah, take her and go." So he's there, but it does seem, as we read through this, that Laban is kind of taking a primary role in making the decisions, doing the invitations, and kind of running the place. But early the next morning, Abraham's servant said, "Send me back to my master. But we want Rebekah to stay with us at least 10 days, her brother and mother said. Then she could go." But he said, "Don't delay me. The Lord has made my mission successful. Now send me back so I can return to my master." "Well," they said, and here's what you may be thinking about, "we'll call Rebekah and ask her what she thinks."
That's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah. So they called Rebekah. "Are you willing to go with this man?" they asked her. Now, to some extent, "are you willing to go be Isaac's wife?" might be implied in this question, but the issue at this point is, will she go now or will she go later? They wanted her to wait 10 days, and they haven't consulted her until this discussion. And she replied, "Yes, I will go." So they said goodbye to Rebekah and sent her away with Abraham's servant and his men. The woman who had been Rebekah's childhood nurse went along with her. They gave her this blessing as she parted: "Our sister, may you become the mother of many millions. May your descendants be strong and conquer the cities of their enemies." Well, that sounds like typical human understanding of what is God's blessing. May you be able to conquer. May you destroy. That's how we'll know you've been blessed.
Wealthy, conquer, and destroy.
Yeah.
Right. That's not the God I serve.
Well, that's how these people thought. Yeah, and we see
That's what they were taught. So look how long it's been passed down.
well, we
No
see
wonder people think that God is angry and vindictive,
and vicious. Yeah.
vicious. Yeah.
I was going to say, we have people in our day who think of Christian virtue as wishing destruction on enemies. I think we heard a recording this week of somebody saying that you need to pray that bad things will happen to these people. Called it an imprecatory prayer. At any rate, I think we finished verse. What were you saying?
Imprecatory?
Yeah.
Okay. I never figured out what he was talking about. Imprecatory.
Yeah, you're.
Kill my enemies?
Yeah.
Oh, you're right. Okay, yeah.
So there are people preaching that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah, I commented on that.
unfortunately,
Tonight, how this guy is up there preaching all these imprecatory prayers, talking about how we're supposed to kill people. God's going to be killing people, and we're supposed to kill people in the name of the Lord. And God's going to kill all these people that do this, that, and the other. And I commented, I couldn't be quiet. I commented that it's interesting that these evangelical preachers who are calling for God to kill people and for us to kill people in God's name, how are they ignoring the 11th commandment? And then I said what the 11th commandment was, and it was spoken by Jesus himself.
Mm-hmm.
I give you this new commandment, love one another as I have loved you.
Yep.
And that commandment, love one another, has no exception. It means each and every one of us. Because if we start killing people who make boo-boos, we're all dead. Including the people calling for others to be killed.
Mm-hmm.
And this kind of nonsense, evangelical nonsense, they were calling for the death of the atheists is what they were calling for.
Yeah.
And I said, it's interesting that the atheists appear to be closer to God than these so-called preachers, because the atheists have enough intelligence to recognize this evangelical nonsense as nonsense.
Yeah. Well, when you look at it from that perspective and you understand this human desire to conquer our enemies, and if you need help with that, well, where do you get help? Well, you excuse me, you get help from God, right?
Yeah.
So then we want a God who will help us conquer our enemies. Can it be any surprise that the world we live in has this concept of God as a destroyer? That's the God everybody wants, so that's the God they're preaching.
But there's another way to conquer an enemy rather than destroy them.
Yeah.
How about turn the other cheek? How about doing unto others as you want them to do unto you?
Yeah.
Be nice to them.
That is what was so radical about the revelation of God given by Jesus in the New Testament as compared to the Old Testament. Reading on now. Meanwhile, Isaac, whose home was in the Negev, had returned from Beer Lahai Roi. Now that name, Beer Lahai Roi, was given to a well. It was the well where Hagar had collapsed the first time she ran away from Sarah, and where she met the angel of the Lord. And it became Bir Lahai Roi, or well of the God who sees, because God had seen her there and seen her distress and delivered her. So this is where Isaac has been, not Beersheba, not the well of the covenant, or the well of the oath, but Bir Lahai Roi, the well of the God who sees. Which is why we think that once this incident happened, as described back in chapter 22, that Isaac and Abraham separated ways and moved to different parts of the Negev. At any rate, he was there in the Negev. He'd returned from Bir Lahai Roi. One evening, as he was walking and meditating in the fields, he looked up and saw the camels coming. When Rebekah looked up and saw Isaac, she quickly dismounted from her camel. "Who is that man walking through the fields to meet us?" she asked the servant. And he replied, "It is my master." So Rebekah covered her face with her veil. And then the servant told Isaac everything he had done. Now notice there's no mention of Abraham here, just Isaac. And Isaac brought Rebekah into his mother Sarah's tent, and she became his wife. He loved her deeply, and she was a special comfort to him after the death of his mother. Now, what I didn't see here was an indication of his age at this point. And the reason for that is, I believe, that it isn't given here. We only get that from his age when the twins were born, and it says that for 20 years Rebekah was barren. Okay, well, if we
What can cause somebody to not conceive?
What?
You know what can cause somebody to not conceive?
What?
Stress.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm not making a diagnosis, but that can have an effect.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I have a technical problem in here. I need you for just a moment.
Okay. Does it have something to do with a cat on the arm of the chair? No, because the cat's out here.
No. It has something to do with my vision.
Yeah.
I can't see that.
HDMI 2, no signal. Is it on?
It just went away.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I was trying to read.
Did you maybe bump this?
No, it was in here. It was in here.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about this thing over here. Where's the remote for it?
Oh. It would be in the middle pocket. But I didn't stick my hand in there.
Look.
I pulled this out to see if I could get it to come on. Sorry, if you're wondering, my monitor went dead on me. Says it's not getting a signal. And I was trying to follow along on Bible Gateway. I didn't get out of my chair. There wasn't a cat in here. I didn't reach over to have any controls to, any remotes to change anything. I might have used the mouse. In fact, I probably was using the mouse.
Give me a moment here. We apologize, folks, for the delay here. Let's see if we can't get this worked out.
Well, you know by now that we can't do this without having some kind of technical problem.
Well, the computer still seems to think that.
Yeah, I'm using, I'm stuck in a recliner. They want my legs up almost around the clock, almost. And it's weakened me, so I'm pretty much stuck in this recliner. So I have a large screen TV on the other side of the room, and it just went dead on me. I use that or whatever I'm doing. you know, I could entertain people with that song I was singing earlier.
Yeah, well, it's probably asking me if I want to keep these changes.
Yeah,
That's not what I want. Well, did that just close the whole thing? I think it did.
you want to come up here? Come up.
Well, I'm unable to sort it out at this point. We need to keep going, and I can
Okay.
come back in here and work on this.
Can you bring me a Bible and turn on the light?
What Bible do you want?
How about my pink one?
Your big one is.
Well, you kind of took over it, didn't you? Wore it out.
Are you thinking of the reddish one?
Hey. NIV.
Well, here, let me give you your copy of the
translation we're reading.
This isn't it.
No,
No, that's your copy of the translation we're reading from.
Okay.
Has your name on it. All right, technical difficulties. Something died. Not sure what.
My television died.
She's viewing. Well, the television's working. It's not displaying what's coming from the computer. There's a picture on the TV, but we have the TV connected to the computer through a switch box because the TV only has 3 HDMI ports, and we have one game machine connected to one port, another game machine connected to another port. Well, then we have 2 more game machines and the computer
Don't be telling all that.
to hook up. So that goes to the 3rd port. So we have a special switch to do that. And I was playing with that switch and it's not making a difference. So I'm not sure at this point what the problem is and don't want to take time right now to sort all that out. Let's move on to the next chapter and see how far we can get in that chapter before our time runs out here. Chapter 25, with the subtitle The Death of Abraham at the first part of this. Abraham married another wife. Remember, he had about 40 years, almost, after Sarah's death, whose name was Keturah. She gave birth to Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sons of Abraham by his, technically his 3rd wife, at least. Jokshan was the father of Sheba and Dedan. Dedan's descendants were the Asherites, Letushites, and Lumites. Midian's sons were Ephah, Epher, Hanok, Abida, and Eldah. These were all descendants of Abraham through Keturah. Now, of course, the name Midian is going to come up later in the Old Testament and be a significant name. It was descendants of Midian who oppressed the Israelites in the days of Gideon. And these were very close relatives to the Israelites, as they, like Ishmael and Isaac, were all sons of Abraham. Abraham gave everything he owned to his son Isaac, which is an interesting way of putting it because we're about to find out that it wasn't everything he owned. But before he died, he gave gifts to the sons of his concubines, notice that that is plural, and sent them off to a land in the east away from Isaac. In other words, he didn't want them to be contending with Isaac for the land, and he didn't want them receiving the bulk of his estate, so he gave them gifts and sent them away so that Isaac would be his primary heir. Abraham lived for 175 years, and he died at a ripe old age, having lived a long and satisfying life. He breathed his last and joined his ancestors in death. His sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah near Mamre, in the field that Ephron, son of Zohar, the Hittite. This was the field Abraham had purchased from the Hittites, and where he had buried his wife Sarah. After Abraham's death, God blessed his son Isaac, who settled near Beer Lahai Roi in the Negev. So he's still living in that territory. Now, how old was Isaac when Abraham died? Well, if he was born when Abraham was 100, then Isaac was 75. So we're reading about something that happens after events that we're about to read, as you're about to see. Here's a quick account of Ishmael's descendants. This is the account of the family of Ishmael, the son of Abraham, through Hagar, Sarah's Egyptian servant. Here is a list by their names and clans of Ishmael's descendants. The oldest was Nebaioth, followed by Kedar, Abdeel, Mibsam, Mishma, Duma, Massa, Hadad, Tema, Jetur, Naphish, and Kedema. These 12 sons of Ishmael became the founders of 12 tribes named after them, listed according to the places they settled and camped. Ishmael lived for 137 years. Then he breathed his last and joined his ancestors in death. Ishmael's descendants occupied the region from Havilah to Shur, which is east of Egypt in the direction of Ashur. There they lived in open hostility toward all their relatives. And there's a footnote there after relatives saying that the meaning of the Hebrew is uncertain. So we've translated it that he lived in hostility, but we're not sure that's exactly what the Hebrew means. Reading on. This is the account of the family of Isaac, the son of Abraham. When Isaac was 40 years old, he married Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel the Aramean from Padan Aram, and the sister of Laban the Aramean. So this was about 4 years after his mother died that he married Rebekah. Isaac pleaded with the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was unable to have children. The Lord answered Isaac's prayer, and Rebekah became pregnant with twins. But the two children struggled with each other in her womb. So she went to ask the Lord about it. "Why is this happening to me?" she asked. And the Lord told her, "The sons in your womb will become two nations. From the very beginning, the two nations will be rivals. One nation will be stronger than the other, and your older son will serve your younger son." We'll have reason to refer back to this verse as we go on in the story Probably won't get, well, I'm sure we won't get there tonight because we're about to call things off tonight. But later, as we go through the story of this dysfunctional family, we're going to have reason to refer again to this text and what Rebekah heard and how she understood it. And when the time came to give birth, Rebekah discovered that she did indeed have twins. The first one was very red at birth and covered with thick hair like a fur coat. So they named him Esau. Footnote B. Esau sounds like a Hebrew term that means hair. Esau would also, at different points in his life, be called Edom. Edom is like the Hebrew for red. So hairy and red were his names. Then the other twin was born with his hand grasping Esau's heel. So they named him Jacob. Footnote C. Jacob sounds like the Hebrew words for heel and deceiver. Well, we do occasionally use the term heel to refer to somebody that's an unpleasant person to deal with, even in our modern parlance. In this case, the Hebrew words for heel and deceiver sound kind of like the name Jacob, and so he ends up with that name. So they named him Jacob. Isaac, supplanter, deceiver, yeah. Isaac was 60 years old when the twins were born. So that's how we know that it was about 20 years from when Isaac and Rebekah met until she actually delivered the twins. And as far as we can tell, this one pregnancy is the only pregnancy Rebekah ever had. You know, it's possible that she had daughters that don't get mentioned, but it's also possible that she just had these two boys. And while we are not to the end of the chapter, we are to the end of our time. And I think maybe we'll leave the story here for the rest of chapter 25 for next week. Now, I didn't mention it earlier, but I did mention it last week. We do have a sermon presentation prepared that we will deliver tomorrow. Despite the difficulties we've had with our internet connection this week, we are going to chance it and attempt to do that live, stream it live. That will be tomorrow or Saturday the 30th of March at 11 a.m. Central Time. And that'll be Central Daylight Savings Time because we're now on daylight time. So just if you want to catch it on the live stream, that's when we're going to do it. It will be an Easter-themed sermon presentation. We have it ready. I went through and proofread it just before we began recording this session.
Before you quit,
All right? What?
what I was trying to look for, if you can pull up Bible Gateway and type in the search engine Eliezer. And I spelled it wrong, was why I couldn't find the right one.
Yeah.
It's Eliezer, I think.
Yeah.
And you might find where he's mentioned by name.
Well, I already found it. Chapter 15. We read that.
This is somewhere else as well.
Oh, you want me to do that now?
Yeah. Because if he's somewhere else as well, you might have the answer to your question. And it's I-E. Not
Well, I'm
E-A.
having trouble finding the search thing here. Oh, there it is. It's that little search glass icon.
It's way up at the top of the. It's on.
Yeah, I've got it.
Way up at the top in the.
But it's reloading the page and not bringing the I have to type it in here. It's got where the text is. Okay.
You can type in the text. You can type in.
Yeah.
Book,
Okay, let me punch it now. See what I get.
You can type in the name.
Okay, what I get is Genesis 15:2, which is the one we found. Exodus 18:4.
That would be the wrong one.
That would be the son of Moses.
Right. It's the son of Aaron.
First Chronicles, no. I don't think so, because it says for Moses it said.
Well, Aaron's son is Eleazar.
Okay. Well, this is Eliezer.
Okay.
And I get Eliezer of Damascus and Eliezer, the second son of Moses. There's
Okay.
also a son of Becher mentioned in 1 Chronicles 7:8. And Eliezer, who was a priest, in 1 Chronicles 15:24. And then the Eliezer, the son of Moses, mentioned in 1 Chronicles 23:15. And again in verse 17. And apparently again in chapter 26, verse 25. And then there's an Eliezer mentioned in 1 Chronicles 27:16. The following were the tribes of Israel and their leaders. Tribe leader Reuben, Eliezer son of Zichri. Simeon, Shephatiah son of Makkah, and so on. And then second
Okay.
Chronic.
I am not thinking clearly.
Then Eliezer son of Dodavahu from Mareshah prophesied against Jehoshaphat and said, because you've allied yourself with King Ahaziah, the Lord will destroy your work. So the ships met with disaster and never put out to sea. There's an Eliezer mentioned in Ezra. Several times in Ezra. And there's also an Eliezer mentioned in the family tree of Jesus as given in Luke. So that's what Bible Gateway found for us. So that was extra time. We're over by almost 10 minutes here. So as I say, you feel free to join us for the sermon presentation. Tomorrow we'll stream it live at 11 Central Time. Of course, once it's been streamed, you can view it anytime you like. So, we invite you to join us for the Bible study portion again next week about this same time. And until then, we say goodbye and God bless.
Bye, everyone.